from the University of Kansas Health System.
I am amazed. The team here is great.
I came on a Tuesday, and then by Saturday I had a heart in me.
I have never seen a group of people work together so good as this team of heart specialists. I mean, it's just unreal.
Stand by to set up show.
And the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio.
Roll it.
Always makes you feel like you're the most important patient on the planet.
I felt heard, and that was really big.
This is All Things Heart.
Good morning, I'm Alexis Del Cid. Welcome back to All Things Heart. Here's what we're talking about today.
Fluttering in your chest to the point where I would get like a cold sweat, and I felt like I was immediately going to pass out.
And that flutter kept coming back, and it turned out to be the key warning sign that saved her life. As always, we love your questions. You, our viewers, are the heartbeat of our show, and you can connect with us in real time on any of our platforms. We're on the X platform, YouTube, Facebook, or at the All Things Heart email. All those links are right there on your screen. And now to Brittany Claiborne. She's a mother of two, an elementary school teacher, and she begins every morning with a run. But her typical routine took a turn when she began noticing extreme fluttering in her chest, and that's what led her doctors to an alarming discovery.
Running is what gives Brittany Claiborne peace.
I have been a runner since college.
It's how she starts every morning before heading to her third grade classroom at Carterville Elementary. We catch up with her between classes, our interview periodically interrupted with announcements about Picture Day.
Oh, sorry.
May I have your attention, please? This is the last call.
Life feels like it's finally back to normal for the 39-year-old Joplin mom of two after a frightening ordeal beginning in December of 2021 during every morning run.
Fluttering in your chest to the point where I would get like a cold sweat, and I felt like I was immediately going to pass out. There was one morning that was pretty bad where I just felt like I was going to go down, and I grabbed a fence post that was close.
She went to a doctor in Joplin who fitted her with a wearable heart monitor.
And they actually did tell me, we want you to go ahead and run.
She ran with it for a week before turning the monitor back in. A few hours later, she got an urgent call from the hospital.
The ER doctor that's here read your Holter, and you do not run anymore. You've had 202 episodes of like a ventricular tachycardia. And I, at one point, had reached like 280 beats per minute. They were like, honestly, you could have died. It was that bad.
Diagnosed with ventricular tachycardia, her Joplin doctor then sent her to Dr. Seth Sheldon at the University of Kansas Health System.
I could tell he cared, and he knew exactly my case, and he was very, very good at describing, here's what I think it is, here's what my plan of action is, and like making me a priority of like, I'm gonna fix you.
Dr. Sheldon performed a cardioablation and installed a subcutaneous defibrillator to detect and stop future tachycardia episodes. And he determined the cause, myocarditis, inflammation of Brittany's heart. As for what caused the myocarditis,
so Dr. Sheldon ordered a genetic test.
The test revealed nothing in Brittany's family history, but she revealed something in her own history to Dr. Sheldon: 3 previous COVID-19 infections.
We want to welcome our guest, Brittany Claiborne, from her classroom, once again, her third grade classroom. That's what the 3 is behind her. And her cardiologist, Dr. Seth Sheldon. Dr. Sheldon, thank you for being here. Brittany, we first met you last year, and it was Picture Day, but we might be interrupted by an announcement for the Pledge of Allegiance in just a few moments, right?
Yes, could be.
And your kids are coming out. Thank you so much for taking the time from your classroom to talk to us. Now, you've had a birthday since we last interviewed you. So how long has it been since that ablation?
It was May of last year. So we're coming up almost past a year and a half.
Yeah. Wow. And how are you feeling today?
I'm awesome. I'm really, really good. At times running, and like, man, was my heart that bad? Because I can run really well, and like probably the fastest I've been in a long time. So I feel great, honestly.
That's wonderful to hear, because when you got that call telling you to immediately stop, Because did they say you could die?
No, they just said, I'm sure they didn't want to scare me
right.
to death, but they were very urgent and said, you will be getting a call. It was on a Sunday night. You'll be getting a call tomorrow to get you into a cardiologist stat. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh,
and
wow.
They had called me by 9 a.m. that Monday morning, and I was seen the very next day. So at that point, I knew that it was pretty serious.
And then it was only later on you noticed how potentially serious it could be. Did you notice that flutter only when you were running?
Yes. Exercise. There was maybe a couple other times when I was on the stair climber, but I'd already ran. But yes, it was when I was exercising.
So I want to bring in your doctor, Dr. Sheldon. One, what is ventricular tachycardia, and why does exercise set it off?
Yeah, so ventricular tachycardia is an abnormal rhythm that happens in the bottom chamber of the heart. And basically, instead of the heart waiting for its normal command center to start the heartbeat, an area of the heart decides it wants to be its own boss, and it's going to take over and go really quick. And that sometimes happens in the top chambers of the heart, and we call it a supraventricular tachycardia, or a fancy way of saying from the top chamber of the heart. And then ventricular tachycardia, which is typically more concerning, is when the bottom chamber of the heart decides it wants to go fast and be its own boss.
Kind of goes rogue.
Yes.
On the rest of the body. And
Yep.
hers was at 280 beats a minute. To put that in perspective, what's normal when you're doing a vigorous exercise like running?
Great question. Normal can be different for each patient. So there's some spectrum where someone's heart rate can be with exercise. Usually the maximum heartbeat that you would expect to get with exercise is 220 minus your age. So if you're working super hard, the max of what you can go to, typically it's 220 minus your age that you would get to. So this is far above that.
280.
Yeah.
And that is, she ultimately got the message that's potentially deadly. But when you hear that, are you thinking, holy cow?
Yeah, that's a concerning, very fast
Yeah.
heart rate. The reason
Wow.
that becomes concerning is the heart is a pump. And so in order to pump effectively, it has to fill between beats. And when the heart's going so quick, it doesn't actually have enough time to fill beforehand. So it starts beating without as much blood volume in the chamber itself. So
It's actually the flutter that she was feeling that
yeah,
she
it's
described.
just super fast.
So we have some scans taken of Brittany's heart that you've shared with us. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so these images represent, on the left there is a picture of what the electrical health is on the inside of Brittany's heart chamber, within the main pumping chamber of the heart called the left ventricle. And the colors represent the health of the tissue, so that we see on the left there, everything is this purplish color, which represents normal, healthy electrical tissue within the heart.
Okay.
On the right is an image of the outside portion of her heart. And this demonstrates an area of scar that's at the apex or kind of out at the tip of the left ventricle. And this was the area that was abnormal and demonstrated scar, and this was the cause for her ventricular tachycardia.
You treated her with something called a cardioablation. What's an ablation in layman's terms? What are
Yeah,
you doing
so it's
there?
basically a means for modifying the tissue so that these circuits can't continue in the future. So we go in either with a freezing catheter or a burning catheter or an electrical current and deliver that to the tissue. In her case, we used a radiofrequency catheter that burns the tissue. And we do that in a selective fashion so that this circuit can't continue in the future.
Brittany, I have to get to the COVID part because you had COVID 3 times before this happened. We're seeing an uptick in cases now across our area. How long after your 3rd infection, how long before you began noticing the heart pounding?
I would say, honestly, between the 2nd and 3rd, I got 2 rounds pretty close to one another.
Back-to-back COVID?
Lost my taste. Yeah, lost my taste and smell. So then I'm like, oh, okay, here we go again. Because it was like a January. I had my first episode running was in December. I got COVID again in January. And it started to progress. And it was weird because it wouldn't happen every single time. Then I got COVID one more time in February. And after that time, every single morning that week in February when I got the Holter, I felt it every time. And like the doctors had told me even in Joplin, you may have not, because you're pretty healthy, have felt every time, but you were having episodes. So the top part of my heart was doing its job and saving me, I suppose. But it was after that 3rd round that it was every morning because I remember feeling that nervousness of like I should be going out as a stress reliever, and I was getting anxious going out to run because I'm like, is this the morning it's going to happen again? Like I just knew in my gut something is off. It shouldn't be happening.
So as a cardiologist, Dr. Sheldon, now that we're 3.5 years from the start of the pandemic, do you suspect it is COVID that would have caused this? I mean, are you seeing this as a pretty clear link?
Yeah, so in this situation, there's no way to know definitively.
Right.
What we can say is that there's an area of scar tissue that's outside the normal area for what would be expected to cause these types of rhythm issues. So the most common cause of ventricular tachycardia is prior history of a heart attack, which obviously Brittany's not had. She doesn't have a plumbing issue, no problems with the blood flow supply to her heart. So we were suspicious that maybe she'd had some prior infection or something that caused inflammation within the heart, and then as a residual effect from that left this region of scar tissue. Whether it was COVID or something else, it's difficult to say.
And COVID can cause inflammation of the heart, myocarditis.
Correct.
Which is what Brittany had.
Yeah, so she did not have signs of active myocarditis.
Okay.
So we did a PET scan to look for metabolism within the heart, and there was not evidence of active inflammation within the heart, but there was this region of scar that could be suspicious for having had it months or years before.
So have you treated other patients that you believe with similar problems that may have been triggered by COVID or had COVID right before they saw you? Are you starting to see some other correlations?
We've seen this occasionally, yes.
Okay.
Either rhythm issues that have happened after COVID or patients that have really slow heart rates that happen after COVID or in the midst of COVID. And in some rare situations, it could present similar to Brittany.
When it comes to myocarditis, which is the inflammation of the heart, is there anything people watching can do to stop that from happening, like dietary or keep it from getting worse if they have it? Or is it just something you don't know until you get symptoms from it?
Difficult to say, sometimes these things run their course, but certainly if you have symptoms, it's good to talk with your physician and try to figure out what's the cause of this. When you're sick, it's good to rest and kind of listen to your body.
Right.
And if something doesn't feel right, probably best to give it a chance to get better. And if it's not getting better, talk with your provider about it.
Does myocarditis always lead to ventricular tachycardia?
No, vast majority of the time it comes and then it goes, and oftentimes it is self-resolving over time.
So Brittany has a kind of implant that's called an SICD, correct?
Correct,
yes. And what is that?
Yeah, so this stands for a subcutaneous ICD. It's a defibrillator, which is a device that's capable of shocking your heart back to rhythm if you have a life-threatening rhythm issue. And so traditionally, these are put into the inside of the heart.
Yeah.
On this x-ray, you can see from the side of her chest, there's a generator or can at the side of her chest. And this is attached to a wire that goes along the chest wall. And instead of going into the heart, which would be a traditional fashion for a defibrillator, this is something that stays only on the chest wall and has less risk of complications because of that.
So Brittany, can you feel the SICD, can you feel it kicking into action?
No, I, thank goodness, have never had another episode. And so it's tracked remotely. I have a heart monitor in my room that I basically hit it every Monday, and doctors or whomever is following that looks at it, but I've never had an episode. So it's never got active. It's never shocked me. So I'm hoping and praying that's the case for the rest of the duration of having this device. So I've never felt, I feel it on the outside of my body.
Is it like a lump on the outside of your body? Can you feel it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's rather large. I call it my box. And so for me, I'm more of a petite person. So it sits right on the side, like under my arm. And so when kids get ready to hug me, I always tell them oh, you're going to be able to feel my box. It feels a little weird because it just kind of protrudes out. It does not bother me at all at this point. It's just a part of the side of my body, and people don't notice it unless I were to say something in a tank top or a swimsuit or something.
Well, it's kind of cool to see science in action. That's really a cool learning experience for the kids that you're open about it and they can come up and see it or if they give you a hug, they can feel that you're like the bionic woman.
Yeah, I guess so. They're like, is it gonna shock? I'm like,
Right.
I hope not. But at the same time, I tell them all this at the beginning of the year because most of them had heard, because it's a K-4 school, so we're a neighborhood school. So I tell them like my heart's fine, but then at the same time I'm like, I teach them, but if something were to happen, like, do you know how to call 911? Do you know who to call? Like, and go over it almost with their family, like if this happens. And ironically, last week we had Grandparents' Day and a lady fell right next to me, went down, and I immediately went into, like 911, sitting with her, like with the nurse, getting her help. And I went back over it with the kids. If that happens at home, because you don't know these days. And with COVID and all the things, it's just scary. I want them to be prepared, I suppose.
You're such a good teacher, and that's such a good learning experience for the kids to know how to call 911. That's phenomenal. Is myocarditis, Dr. Sheldon, I'm going to ask you, is it ever cured?
It's not active anymore, so we can say that we did testing to show that it's not active. It's left some residual damage within the heart, and so I wouldn't consider it cured, but it's not active.
We want to go to some of our questions from our community because we have so many questions right now. Elizabeth Fabry has a question. This is for Dr. Sheldon. Elizabeth writes, my son recently had COVID, is an athlete. He says he feels fine now. Do you think he can return to regular training, or should he take it easy for a while? And then she says, I realize you can't give a particular medical advice. I just want to know what you would advise generally.
Yeah, so I think for, COVID is very prevalent, unfortunately, and many of us have had it. And I think once you're outside of the acute infection stage, it would be acceptable to return to physical activity if you feel back to yourself again. So probably not the best to be pushing it and doing a lot of exercise if you're really short of breath or you're having chest discomfort and other things with COVID. But once you're better, I think it's fine to go ahead and return to activities.
One of the most valuable pieces of advice I got from Dr. Brandon Comfort, another Dr. Rex, I had COVID as well, Brittany, and he told me, don't push through. Like, you can push through a cold.
Yeah.
But COVID's the one thing you don't just keep forging ahead on.
Yeah. Give
yourself time. Yen Liang has a question. He wants to know if people who've been previously infected with COVID have a higher incidence of AFib compared to those who have not had the virus.
That's a question I don't have a full answer to.
Okay, we'll have to go.
I think it's certainly conceivable that you could have a higher incidence of AFib after COVID, and certainly in the acute setting of COVID, yes. We know that patients are more likely to develop atrial fibrillation in the midst of it. As far as whether that predisposes you long-term to AFib, difficult to say, especially because more than half the population has probably had COVID at this point, so it's tough to discern that.
Becca has a question for you, Brittany. Becca wants to know if you're back to running your full courses again.
Yes. I run my normal mileage back at it. Like I said, I'm probably faster than I used to be, but yep, everything is great, and I'm back to my normal routine.
So this morning you woke up at what time?
I woke up at 4:25 and was out the door running at 4:40.
Man, and then you go teach. You have 2 kids at home, and you teach a full class of 3rd graders. Do you drink coffee? I'm just curious now as a mom. Do you drink coffee?
Yes.
Okay.
An obscene amount of coffee. But
so
like
do
this
I,
evening we're going to a football game, so it's like
Yeah.
I just try to get it out of the way and not mess with everybody else's schedule.
Well, that's incredible. Patty wants to know if you had any side effects from the ablation. What was the recovery like?
I would say the ablation was honestly probably easy. It was the ICD that caused a lot more recovery time because of the cutting of the tissues and things. But when the ablation in the hospital, they leave you pretty still for a while. It was kind of felt like a little bit of a burning sensation, but honestly, I think if I just had the ablation, I would have felt pretty great within the next few days.
Jeremy Yenser just wrote on Facebook, he's one of our Facebook viewers, does the heart scarring heal or change over time, or is that just the way it is now for her? And if so, what does that do to the heart?
So there was scar there to begin with, and once you develop scar, it's typically not going to go away. So that's part of why we decided to put a defibrillator in after the procedures. We felt like she was going to be at risk for life-threatening rhythm issues. Even though we changed things such that we think it's less likely for that to happen, we felt like the risk was not zero, and that's why we did the defibrillator. So it will stick around.
Laura has a question, Brittany. Has this changed your daily routine at all, or have you made any dietary changes, or are you just back to what you were doing before?
I was pretty healthy before, like dietary wise. I did learn through the whole journey to prioritize sleep, which I'm just getting up early. But if there's mornings where like I'm like, you know, I need more sleep for my immune system, to be honest, I do that. And probably the biggest change I've made is when I don't feel good, don't push through, because I was the one that would, if I go run, it'll make me feel better. And those endorphins would, but it was really probably causing more damage. So that's the biggest thing I've taken away and told people, especially in my profession, if you're tired or if you're sick, just forego the exercise and take care of your body.
I feel like before this, you were the kind of gal who would run with a fever and think you would just sweat it out. Something like that. So it's nice to hear you're prioritizing sleep and boosting your immune system. Tom has a question for Dr. Sheldon about how you diagnose myocarditis.
Yeah, so typically it is diagnosed in one of a few different ways. One can be there's sometimes evidence in the bloodstream of the muscle enzymes from the active inflammation that can happen. And then oftentimes we obtain an imaging study to assess for that as well. So specifically, an MRI of the heart can sometimes show evidence of this, or a cardiac PET scan can look for active inflammation within the heart.
And Amelia wants to know, is the subcutaneous device implanted in her, does that last forever, or does she have to have it changed out?
So the battery on it can last anywhere from probably 7 to 11 or 12 years.
Oh, that's
depending.
great.
Yes. So
And
then it has to get changed out at that time.
And are you reading the results of that? She presses a little button and it beams it back to your office?
Yes, it's kind of like magic to a certain extent. But the way that happens is it's transmitted to an office, and then it comes in through a platform that allows us to prioritize these reads, because obviously we have tens of thousands of patients with devices. And so we need a way to kind of rank what's important with these. And then we review them on a periodic basis, but it pushes a notification to us if we see something that's urgent.
I have a question for Brittany. When you fly anywhere, can you go through the metal detectors, or do you have to tell them ahead of time you've got that implant?
I just flew this summer, and I actually always tell them, I always have my medical ID card just in case. And most of the time, they let me go in the one where you stand and hold up your arms, and they might wand me down after that, but it's been honestly pretty easy. I do tell them ahead of time, you're going to see this. And I've only had one instance where they pulled me aside and put me in a room by myself, and they made me show it to them.
Oh, no
I guess
way.
They thought I was like, they said they were just worried about me smuggling drugs or something, because it does look like a box. But I was like, I promise. I've had to rub my hand on it, and then they tested my hand. I guess that would detect drugs or something. So it's been interesting.
Wild.
My friends that fly with me are always like, "Oh, here we go."
It's like a weird VIP treatment. And did you get to teach them like you teach your third graders?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, they're like, most of them, I've never seen anything like that before. I'm like, well, you learned something new today.
You are a good teacher. You're just living your whole life is teaching people new things. For our final thoughts today, I would love to share something, Brittany, that you said when you were reflecting on the care you got here at the health system and Dr. Sheldon.
Him coming in and talking me through, and my family, like, and treating me like if this was my sister, this is what I would do.
Brittany, that must have been so reassuring to be treated like family.
Yes, I speak very highly of all of the KU staff, but Dr. Sheldon and his team, they were so amazing, and they treated me like family. They always knew my case, and they were very, like I said earlier, urgent in taking care of me. And I'm so, so thankful that I can live my life and go out and run worry-free. And I'm forever grateful for the care that I was given.
Dr. Sheldon, that has to feel amazing to hear that and then to come full circle and see Brittany
Yeah,
again.
It's very sweet of Brittany to pass along those kind messages, and I think it's just a reflection of the team we have. We have a wonderful team. It takes so many people to take care of complex patients that have challenging situations, and we've got a great team to do that. So.
And what would be your final thoughts for viewers who are watching, who might notice a symptom and try to power through or feel a little flutter in their heart?
So first of all, probably some reassurance. The vast majority of the people that have a fluttering sensation within the heart or feel abnormal things, it's probably not as severe as what Brittany's situation is. But that being said, there's going to be a subset of patients that do have things that are significant. So it's important to listen to your body. It's important to have communication with your providers and get the care that you need.
Dr. Sheldon, thank you. And Brittany, you just had wonderful things about as well to say the work inside the hospital. However, everyone's always asking what doctors are like outside of the hospital.
Now for a secret look into the guardians of healthcare at the University of Kansas Health System. Let's go behind the mask.
All right, Dr. Sheldon, we're going behind the mask with you. And these are some great family pictures you shared. Who are these superstars with you?
Yeah, so this is my wife, Kelly Kate, and then my 3 daughters. So.
And what are their names?
Flora, Claire, and Olivia.
How old are they?
So they are 9, 6, and 3.
You have your hands full. And yet, talk about energy. You keep pretty busy yourself. You are really an outdoorsman. You bike, you water ski. Is your whole family sporty?
They all like to do things outside, which is fun.
And are the little ones skiing too yet?
For water skiing, only our oldest right now.
Okay.
But for snow skiing, we have essentially all 3 have been out on skis before.
I love that. And then you shared with us a group picture. What are you doing here?
Yeah, so this is our staff from the EP lab and some of our providers and nurses and technicians.
What does EP stand for our
Electrophysiology. So it's like electrical heart doctor.
So that's a lot of smarts in that picture.
Yes, there's a great team there, and it just takes such a collaboration to do complex procedures and take care of patients.
If I have a medical emergency, I want to be hanging out where there's EPs gathering after work just to hang out as well.
Let's not have anything happen.
I'm just saying. Dr. Sheldon, thank you so much for letting us into your world, giving us a peek at your family. And Brittany, thank you for sharing your health journey with us and our viewers and your classroom. Really sweet to talk to you again. We're so happy you're doing great. And to our viewers, thanks for joining the conversation. Coming up next week on All Things Heart. It is almost World Heart Day, and we hear remarkable stories from patients benefiting from the newest and best cardiology teams here at the University of Kansas Health System. And we'll tell you how to avoid heart problems before they develop. We're also sharing some delicious and simple heart-healthy recipes. That's all coming up next Thursday morning at 8 a.m.
Coming up tomorrow on the Morning Medical Update. He used to play for the Chiefs. Now he's helping fight cancer on a bike. I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Morning Medical Update. Meet this player and a mom riding coast to coast to help her son fight cancer. Friday at 8.